Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Joe Patrick on Football. Of course, my name is Joe Patrick, and as you can tell by the jacket, just home from Matt Ryan's introductory press conference at Flowery Branch, which was it was great. I got to say, and I think I speak for a lot of other media members, to be perfectly honest, whether they would say it or not. But it was it was nostalgic and kind of sentimental to see Matt Ryan back, wearing the Falcons pin on his blazer and part of the team, back part of the organization, back part of trying to get this team wins just like he was when he was the starting quarterback. But I couldn't have been the only one in that room that had lots of different kind of memories floating through my head while he was talking about this Falcons football team and what can become of it. And I think that for a lot of Falcons fans who are watching it online, or you're catching clips of it over the day and the next couple of days on 99 the game. I'm sure that's what a lot of people will be thinking about, is that those best moments of Matt Ryan. And it was just, again, in this press conference, just how aggressive he is, how on top of it he is. Obviously, a lot of things were held close to the vest at this time, obviously with the team undergoing a GM and coaching search. There's lots of secrets that need to be held on that front, and not wanting to give too much away, not wanting to kind of oversell promises, whatnot, get out ahead of yourself. But it was just a great day for, I think, Falcons fan base and for everybody to see Matt Ryan sitting there in that chair, center stage in the Falcons team meeting room, welcomed back into the organization as the president of football. So let's get into that a little bit. This president of football role is something that we talked about after Arthur Blank's press conference last week, where he described a little bit about what the role is and why they felt it was necessary to create the role, whether it was through their own assessment or that of Sportology, who's been in the building with them, but seeing just the lack of accountability, the lack of communication in certain areas, all the dysfunction that was identified, by the team and the organization, has led to this moment where we get Matt Ryan, again, someone of just impeccable character, impeccable qualities in terms of his ability to communicate, his ability to decipher problems, football-related problems, and try to solve this, get to the bottom of those solutions. Now, a lot of that, when he was the quarterback for this team, would have happened kind of without full understanding from the audience or the fans in attendance as to how he's problem solving on the field. And this will be a little bit different. Now he's going to have to problem solve behind the scenes on some higher level, issues for this organization. But I can't imagine there's going to be anybody better. And there's so many reasons why Matt Ryan is really the perfect candidate. I think that there are probably some things about the Falcons that are unique challenges for the Atlanta Falcons, and I'll probably be talking to some people here over the coming days on Joe Patrick on Football that we can really dive into some of those. But I'll just say it off. Matt Ryan said it. There's unfinished business with him coming back, and we all know what that means. And he talked about it. He said there's unfinished business. We were close. We didn't get the job done when we needed to. And I know a lot of people are thinking about that one moment, but there were other moments. There was that NFC Championship against the 49ers few years prior, where that team should have, they had a 2-touchdown lead, I believe, against the 49ers twice, maybe in that game. I was at that game, and they came just a bit short. So there were other moments as well where obviously this team was very close. That obviously would have been, to go to the Super Bowl. Against a John Harbaugh Ravens team, by the way, who is in the news for the Falcons, but that's a whole different story. But I think that there's obviously the lingering effects of what happened in that Super Bowl. That I think that Matt Ryan is uniquely qualified to come in and get to the bottom of. And I don't want to hang that moment up as too much of like an impediment for this team and where they've been trying to go over these last 8 years in which they haven't been in the playoffs. But I think clearly that if it is affecting this team, this organization, this fan base in any kind of way, then Matt Ryan is going to be the guy who understands what that means and what it's going to take to get this team, out of that hole and get that monkey kind of off their back so that they can play free and aggressive and confident and really feel like unleashed to basically kind of put themselves out there and become the best version of the Atlanta Falcons that is possible. So, what will be Matt Ryan's role specifically? I think this is the big question that a lot of people have, and I think that there's frankly some concern about whether there isn't enough definition between all these roles at the top of the organization, these key decision-making roles, and will there be there then some poor communication, some cluttered communication, some disagreements that could turn into bad decision making at the top if you don't have that clear structure of command and authority. And I thought it was interesting that Arthur Blank during this press conference at one point someone mentioned power. And he says that he does not use that word within the organization just because I think of what it conveys. It's a term that's got a lot of loaded assumptions and baggage that come with it. He talks about authority. Who has authority in a given situation? And so I'll use that word, but I think that it's fair to have some questions about how this is all going to play out. And while I'll say that everything the Falcons are doing with this Matt Ryan hiring and how he's going to help them in terms of the future hirings going forward, and how I think that is exactly what should have happened, no guarantee that it's going to work. Just because I came up with it doesn't mean that it's going to be one that it is actually the right way to go about things, although I think it is. But two, that it's obviously going to be executed in the right way. In order for this to be executed in the right way, Matt Ryan is going to have to be pretty unselfish in this role and really deflect a lot of what we hope are going to be good things to come on the field, and also just kind of like off the field in terms of the transactions and the way that they're building the team. I think that Matt Ryan is going to have to deflect a lot of that success, whether it's worth it or whether it's deserved or not from a GM and a head coach, onto those guys, onto those individuals, not only for kind of claiming success, but I think in his role as the president of football, if we think about that word president, it's to kind of preside and to like oversee and not to kind of be the one who is the chief executive. Of course, that's Greg Beatles. That's a whole different conversation. But ultimately, the GM is going to have authority to be the GM. You can take my word for it or not, but I firmly believe that when they get into, let's say, the draft, for example, it's going to be the GM who's making that pick. Matt Ryan will obviously be involved in the draft picks because Matt Ryan will be, attending the combine. He will be in the ear of the GM. He will be bouncing things off of him. But ultimately, that GM is going to be responsible. And again, I asked Matt if he would reveal kind of who he's talked to, because he mentioned that he has talked to some individuals around the league who have played and then gone into roles similar to his. And I asked him if he would, reveal anyone that he's talked to like that, and if he likens his role to any of them in particular. And he didn't want to answer that, which is his prerogative. But I kind of have always likened his role most to Chris Spielman. And Chris Spielman, I talked about Matt needing to kind of maybe take a back seat in some of these, in some circumstances, in order to shine the light on different people and ensure that they are the ones that fans understand had authority in given situations. And Chris Spielman, if you go and research him, one of the things that you'll find first and foremost that he does not want to talk about his role. He does not want to take any credit for anything that happens in the organization, frankly, even though a lot of it is down to him. He basically sees like what Arthur Blank says is like a servant leader, someone who's just there to support others and help them make the best decisions. And so when it comes back to the draft and the GM having the authority to make the draft picks that he sees best help the team, that's where I think Matt Ryan is going, let me talk about Spielman here in particular. He is in that room. He is influencing Brad Holmes, but he's not making the draft picks for Brad Holmes. He's letting Brad Holmes ultimately make the pick, but his whole role is to be there to poke holes in Brad Holmes and his the way that he goes about assessing these types of players and questioning his final assessments of players, even players they ultimately draft. Ultimately every player that is scouted by a team is going to have their strengths and weaknesses, and there's going to be a debate internally about whether this is the best player to bring into the organization to address the needs that we have, and what needs you have that go left unfilled in the draft, like how you're going to go about filling all those needs. And so it's obviously a very complex puzzle. And I think Matt Ryan is going to be like Chris Spielman, where he's just going to be kind of alongside the process, asking probing questions to, key personnel, Ian Cunningham, whoever it might be at GM, et cetera, et cetera. Again, questioning assumptions, offering his thoughts, but ultimately it's not going to be him who's making those picks. And so you can shake your head at that and say, I don't like this. I'd rather have, clear executive authority from the top on down, and that's that. But that's the way that this is going to go, and we'll see if it's right. But it's just the way it is. And I credit Mark Zinno, who's a friend of the show, who kind of tried to ask about this, and Matt didn't really answer, but I think part of the reason is because it is a little bit gray. It's not like, and especially considering they don't even have the GM and head coach kind of there to really discuss the fine details of who's responsible for what and whatnot. It's just going to be tough, and people might not always be satisfied with the way that feels at the top, because it's a lot different. A football team's a lot different than a lot of other businesses. And I'll say this because I had somebody close to me who was, questioning this move despite this person's love for Matt Ryan and everything. And and this person is, very successful in their career. They work for a tech company, and what I had tried to explain to this person who I was talking to is that football's different because the people who ultimately have the most, I'll say, power in an organization, in this case it's the owner, like all the 32 owners, they didn't become owners by being great football players or creating a great football team or managing a great football team. You buy your way in. You buy a team. And the way you buy a team is you make a buttload of money doing something else. And that something else can very often have principles about that line of work that can translate to football. But the difference with football compared to almost every other business is that football is a physical game. So two things important about that. One, the physicality portion of it. It's humans. It's humans running into other humans, and that means there's going to be injuries. There's going to be variables that you can't always account for. There's just it's not as robotic and predictable as kind of A/B testing is in a lot of other areas of business. There's just a different je ne sais quoi about football and sports in general that lead to an unpredictability and a variability about how the results are ultimately going to pan out. And the other thing is that it's a game. This is what I love, by the way, because it's a game. It's 60 minutes of guys going out there and hitting each other and doing these physical things like we talked about, and it produces a result at the end. You either win or you lose. And I thought that it was interesting that Matt Ryan talked about this a bit. He talked about it early in the press conference, and then he kind of went into it on the back of my question as well. And he said that's like one of the things he really embraced about the sport of football, and the excitement that he gets from playing is knowing that at the end of it, you either win or you lose, and it's obvious to everybody, what it was, and the team itself, most importantly, and that's something that he's really excited about, and that's what you actually miss. He talked about you're a competitive person, obviously, if you're playing sports, and you go. In his case, he goes to CBS Sports, becomes a broadcaster, and at CBS Sports, he talks about he has a team that he feels united with, and he I won't say like kind of going into battle like you are in football, but you're getting together every week. You're trying to do your best to put the best product forward, et cetera, et cetera. But in TV, you're not really getting a win loss at the end of the day that tells you whether the work you put in um, was more efficient than your competitors or not. Now, obviously, over the course of time and that business, for example, you're going to have ratings, you're going to have successes in that respect, but there's something about the competitiveness of just getting out there 60 minutes, may the best man win, and everybody knows it at the end of the day. And it's one of the reasons why if you want to take a job in sports, you really do have to have thick skin, because in no other business is one's success or failure as evident as it is in sports in general, and especially the most high profile sport in the world, which is the NFL. And it is the most competitive league when you talk about just the 32 teams that are competing. It is so competitive, and I think, and it's something that Matt Ryan really wants to. He talked about. He just embraces that, and I think that is really important to have at the top of the football organization. And of course, Greg Beatles is the president and CEO of the Falcons, also at the press conference, and he's got a totally different role, and he has a totally different background and set of expertise that can, obviously, the organization needs to also lead to success when it comes to ticket sales and marketing and everything else that it takes to be an efficient football team. But on the sporting side, you need there's just different qualifications that you need, and you also do need some kind of book smart guys on the football side when it comes to digging into analytics. And GMs nowadays are sure, they've got their heads in all kinds of different spreadsheets when it comes to organizing the salary cap and determining whether historically a guy with a certain wingspan and 40-yard dash and bench press is going to be a good tackler, or whatever it might be. There's obviously so many different ways to break down football, and you need good experiences in all different avenues. But I feel like the one that gets overlooked the most, and I think it makes sense when you think about that these teams are led by non-football people. I think that the experience that's missing the most sometimes in these high levels of organizations is the actual playing of football and what it takes to be successful on that front. So that's the voice that Matt Ryan is going to bring to this front office. The GM will still have his role and his duties, and Arthur Blank said it will be no different. The GM role that they're hiring for is not going to be any different than the GM role that Terry Fontenot held, that Thomas Dimitroff held before him, in terms of the authorities that they will have with the Atlanta Falcons organization. While Matt Ryan is at the top of the tree, he's not necessarily the one who is having the final say. And a lot of people are getting hung up on this. Even Matt Ryan kind of talked about it being a little bit of a loaded way to phrase like the final say that happens because there's so many different says that happen in every respect, many that fans are not even aware about. So of course Matt is going to have final say in certain things, but when it comes to the GM and head coach, they will have their authorities, their clear authorities, like they always have. And they did talk a little bit, obviously, when Matt's now in the building and is able to talk to media a little bit, which is, who do you want? Who do you want as your head coach? Do you want an offensive play caller? That seems to be the way the league is trending, and he dismissed that as kind of being what's leading them. Like, they're not going out there looking for the best offensive play caller, and that person is going to be the head coach. And I thought it was interesting that he immediately pivots to, he says you don't need to be an offensive head coach. Just look down the road at Kirby Smart at Georgia, which might get people's eyebrows up or hopes up that they might interview him. I don't think that Kirby is going to have. I don't think he's going to be the next Falcons head coach. I think it would be awesome if he was, but I think he's pretty set at Georgia right now. So, but I know I wanted to kind of put that out there too, because there were some rumors that were picking up steam, like they were legit. But obviously, we know the coaching candidates that they've been bringing in here recently to interview. The most recent one was Mike McDaniel, which happened last night. Obviously, another personnel or potential head coach that's familiar with the Falcons organization. They maybe controversially announced that they interviewed John Harbaugh um, just about 24 hours ago from when I recorded this. That has been um, reported by some New York media as not being a very extensive interview, to the point where it is a phone call basically to kind of sort out some preliminaries in terms of if he would take an interest in the job. So don't know exactly what that all means, but he's obviously going to be on the radar of any NFL team who has a head coaching opening. The Falcons have also interviewed Anthony Weaver, who continues to get a ton of praise. Gotta say, I don't personally know all that much about him, but I believe people when they said that he's going to be a good coach. I just hard for me to see with the Falcons. Clint Kubiak, who we've talked about, Aiden Dirty, who has been here before. British born guy. That would be pretty interesting. But again, I don't think he really stands any chance. I don't think any of these defensive coaches stand a chance, despite the fact of what Matt Ryan said. It's going to either be Clint Kubiak, Kevin Stefanski. Harbaugh would probably be the one non-offensive guy that I would say obviously has a shot at the job. Hard to tell how the Falcons would stack him up against some of these other contenders, but I would also think that if John Harbaugh comes, he's probably bringing Todd Monken with him, which I think a lot of Falcons fans, obviously having that connection to Georgia, would be happy with. I have not digging into Monken's scheme enough to kind of understand whether it would be a great fit, but I've always liked Todd Monken and his play calling in general. So obviously a lot of potential with that one there, but they're not in a rush. They've obviously gotten a lot of these head coaching interviews knocked out, but they explained today that was mostly out of necessity. The fact that if they wanted to get these coaches, some of them interviewed, they had to do it before they got into some of their other playoff stuff. That would apply to both Dirty and Kubiak, who are the two coordinators with the Seattle Seahawks under Mike McDaniel. So they had to kind of get out ahead of that one. We'll probably get some more general manager interview announcements done here, and I would think that it won't take probably much more than about a week or so for them to get that GM filled, and then we'll see about the head coach. Depends on who they ultimately land on wanting, and if they want a coach who is in the playoffs, then like a Clint Kubiak, then it could be a while if the Seahawks continue to win. But basically, what they wanted to put out there was that even though just because they've interviewed a bunch of coaches doesn't mean that the head coaching position is actually going to be hired before the GM. And they did say, Arthur Blank said they wanted to kind of land both planes at the same time because, the GM and the head coach are going to work very closely together once they do get in the building in terms of how they put their heads together to build this roster. So that's all to come. Matt Ryan was also asked about Michael Penix, and he said he loves Michael Penix. That was the quote. But he also then said that I'm not going to get out ahead of talking about Michael Penix before, we have our coach. And this kind of goes back to his point about, sure, Matt Ryan's going to have his own authorities, but I think this is a perfect example of him doing the right thing and saying, and not kind of putting out there, what the plan is going to be for Michael Penix or et cetera, et cetera. They want to make sure they get the head coach and GM interviews complete, obviously, first of all, but then kind of get everybody on the same page before they start kind of discussing what the future plans are going to be for someone like Penix. Obviously, we know, Arthur Blank called Penix the franchise quarterback last Thursday during his press conference. So we know that Penix, he's obviously going to be under contract here for a couple more years. So they're not going to throw him out now that he's got this injury. But I do think that he has to prove it to Matt Ryan and whoever he hires in the back half of this coming season, whenever he gets the chance to play, that he is the guy, that he has made improvements. Don't expect him to be perfect, obviously, but expect him to show some improvements from where he was last year, both in terms of the actual passes being accurate, as well as just being able to run the operation efficiently. And hopefully under a new offensive coordinator, he will be able to do that, because I got to say, it was not perfectly smooth under Kirk Cousins either in terms of the operation. If that's the case, I think you got to put some of that blame off on Zach Robinson, last year's offensive coordinator for the team. So, that was about it. I mean, it's obviously glossed over or didn't even talk about a bunch of this stuff. It was an hour-long press conference. Would encourage everybody to go on to Atlanta Falcons YouTube. You got to go to the live tab to see it if you want to watch the whole thing. But Matt Ryan said it. He said, "No agenda. It's just about winning. It's just about getting this football team back to where he thinks they should be." And I think that is music to every Falcons fans' ears. And I think Falcons fans are very much in the right to say, I'll believe it when I see it, when I start to see the performances and the results turn around. But I think it's frankly, I can't deny it. It's exactly what we were calling for, middle of the season when the team lost that game to the Carolina Panthers. Would encourage anybody to go back on the Joe Patrick on Football, episodes and scroll back to that Panthers game on 910 The Game's YouTube channel and click one of our videos that happened after that game where we really got into a lot of the stuff that the Falcons are now executing on. So gotta hand it to him. One final note, by the way, Arthur Blank did mention he wanted to give credit to Josh Blank, his middle son, for assisting in this whole operation that brought Matt Ryan back to Atlanta. And he gave him a title for the first time I had heard Arthur Blank give his son Josh a title, which was Vice President of Executive Strategy. So there you go. Josh Blank is the Falcons' Vice President of Executive Strategy, which is a very fancy sounding role that deals with executives and strategies. Man, that's when you know you're at the top. But no, it was a great day overall. There's also plenty of videos going around social media of just Matt Ryan and his family. It was great to see his kids sitting there in the front row and his wife Sarah. It just felt right, Just felt like it's the right move and that it's the right fit, and everybody's happy with what the potential is for this whole crew going forward. So just as I am, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are as well. Thank you guys so much for watching or listening to it. You can watch the show on 929 The Game's YouTube channel. Just search 929 The Game on YouTube, and you will see not just my show, Joe Patrick on Football, but all of our other shows, the Behind the Curtain from the Dukes and Bell show and the producers. That's always a good listen. I know that Mike Bell will probably be a little disappointed. He wanted that kind of top down. He wanted Matt Ryan to say, "I'm in charge. I'm laying the law down," but that's not how it's going to be. But always good to get their thoughts as well, and as everybody else, and more to come on 929 The Game's YouTube channel. In fact, a lot more to come. So definitely make sure you're subscribed there, and give a like on this video if you wouldn't mind. That way you will get more of the stuff kind of just popping into your feed. If you do like Falcons content, appreciate that. And if you do just want to get the audio version of the pod, get us on the go, just search Joe Patrick on Football. Wherever you get your podcasts will pop up. So thank you guys so much for listening. We'll come back